Joining us now via the phone is University of Virginia political science professor and director of its Center for Politics, Larry Sabato. He is the founder of Sabato's Crystal Ball, an online newsletter and website that provides free political analysis and electoral projects. And Larry, thanks so much for joining us here again on Newsmax TV.
I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, the Republican presidential debate at Dartmouth was perceived by many as a make or break debate for Texas Governor Rick Perry, yet last night he showed none of the energy his advisors told him was essential. So based on his performance last night, does Rick Perry appear to be confident of his chances of winning the nomination? And do you expect him to ramp up his campaign now, or might it be coming to the end of the line for him?
Rick Perry has 15 million reasons to be confident. That's what he has in the bank. He raised 17 million in the last quarter and has 15 million left. He can raise tens of millions more. As the governor of Texas, he has access to a great deal of money. So, no, I think even though he didn't do well in the debate last night, and he did much worse in the two previous debates, it's clear, as he himself said, debates are not his format. It's hurt him among the base, but he can come back once we get to the real primaries and caucuses starting right after the new year.
Now, Herman Cain, once considered a dark horse candidate, wound up taking most of the blows from the other Republican contenders last night, mostly for his 999 tax proposal. Does that indicate that the other candidates now fear him as a viable contender?
I wouldn't say fear is the right word. There just aren't that many people who think that Herman Cain will end up as the Republican nominee for president. But he clearly crowds out some of the other candidates. I think, for example, Rick Santorum went after him repeatedly last night. Santorum is concerned and frustrated that Cain takes a lot of the attention that might otherwise go to him and some of the other contenders.
Now, Herman Cain has surged in the polls in recent weeks. How do you explain that, and does his surge last?
I don't think the surge will last. He might end up second in the race, for example, once all the votes are counted, because this is an unusual field. You don't have a lot of strong candidates in this field. As far as Cain is concerned, though, he hasn't gotten much scrutiny. That's going to be changing. When you rise to the top of the polls, as he has in a lot of states and even a couple of national surveys, you're inviting scrutiny, and he will get it. His 999 program in particular, I think, is going to have a tough time being held up to the light. The scrutiny is going to make it clear that that program really doesn't add up in the way that he's suggesting. Also, the big problem for the Republicans is it introduces a 9% sales tax. The federal government has never been into sales taxes, never had that authority. A lot of federal people, elected officials and bureaucrats, have wanted to get their hands on sales tax money. Republicans don't want that to happen. So I think once people understand what 999 actually means, they'll be even less inclined to support it.
Now, Mitt Romney had a strong debate performance and also recently received the endorsement of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who in doing so also sent a message to the Tea Party. Is Mitt Romney the GOP's best chance at defeating Obama?
Well, in this field he is. You can make arguments for all kinds of people who didn't run that they would have been stronger candidates. But when you look at this field, who's got the experience, who's been in dozens of debates, who's run for major office, who's been elected to major office, who's been around the track presidentially, there's only one candidate, and that's Mitt Romney. I'm not endorsing Romney. It's not my business to endorse candidates. But I can see why the Republican leadership and Republican big shots like Chris Christie are coming around to Romney. It's not as though they have a lot of choice.
You have said that there's not a lot of strong candidates. Who would have been a better candidate than Mitt Romney and some of these others?
Well, Mitch Daniels, I think, would have been a very strong contender had he decided to run. You could make a good argument for Paul Ryan. You could make a good argument for Jeb Bush. You could make a good argument for Haley Barbour. A number of others, but they didn't run. They made their decision not to run, and the first qualification for a presidential candidate is a willingness to run.
All right. Well, let's get back to Mitt Romney real quickly. Questions have been raised about his faith. He is Mormon. This seems to be an issue on the nightly talk shows and in the media, but just how much of an issue is it going to be for voters, really?
In the end, I'll bet it's a much more minor issue than people think. If it has any impact at all, it's going to occur in Iowa. 60% of the voters in Republican primaries there are, and the caucuses, I should say, are fundamentalist Christians. They are very strongly opposed to Mormonism, or many of them are. So Romney will have a tough time getting their support, a tough time getting fundamentalist support in, say, South Carolina. But I think it's also true that if he is the Republican nominee, overwhelmingly, 90% plus of those Republican fundamentalist Christians will end up voting for Romney. They're not going to sit out the election. They're certainly not going to vote for Obama.
Well, what about religious conservatives, conservative Christians, evangelical Christians? Do they have a candidate right now?
They really don't. Part of the reason why Herman Cain has risen is because he's a placeholder candidate for many of those voters who had been with, say, Michelle Bachmann and have been disappointed by her performance and organization. They've gone with Cain now. They had hoped that Rick Perry would be the answer, and then he seemed to flop in a couple of debates. They're not really sure what to do. I think they're still available to Perry, though. He can come back. Don't know if he will, but he has at least that possibility given his strong financing.
I'd like to ask you about some of the other candidates and get your thoughts on their campaigns, lightning round, if you will, beginning with Representative Ron Paul.
A major force, particularly with young people, stuck at between 10 and 20%, will never be able to exceed that 20%, probably will be closer to 10.
What about former Speaker Newt Gingrich?
Newt Gingrich, one of the brightest candidates out there, always fun to listen to in debates, has enough baggage for a 747 jetliner, just not going to be nominated.
What about Representative Michelle Bachmann?
She had her moment. Her moment came with the Iowa straw poll. I'll be surprised if she's even able to win in the Iowa caucuses. Even if she does, she's not going to be the nominee.
Former Senator Rick Santorum?
He did a good job at the debate last night. He wasn't given many opportunities, but he took them. He was eager. He got into the debate. He went after Kane's 999 plan. But again, so far, there hasn't been room for him. That's why he's trying to move Herman Cain along.
What about former Utah Governor Jon Huntsman?
Jon Huntsman is a candidate in search of a Republican constituency. It's just not there. 20 years ago, he would have had a lot of support because the northeastern, more liberal wing of the party was stronger. Some of them are for Romney, and there aren't many left.
All right, Larry Sabato, thanks so much for joining us here on Newsmax TV.
Thanks very much.